I'm Danny Otto. Welcome into an all-new episode of That Recap Show. Now, before we get into the episode, just want to announce, major spoiler alert, we are going to be going over everything that happened in episode 1 and 2 of X-Men 97. So if you haven't watched those episodes yet, you may want to pause this video, head over to Disney+, check out those episodes, and then come back and enjoy the breakdown. Now, with that out of the way, let's start the show!
Poppin' Off presents That Recap Show.
Joining with me to break down everything from episode 1 and 2 of X-Men 97, it's Jon Jon Rico!
Hey, hi, hey, hello.
I mean, getting right into it, it had all the Saturday morning cartoon feels. Like, they all came back.
I wasted no time.
Immediately, I was transformed back into Saturday morning cartoons. I needed a bowl of cereal while I was watching that. Like, yeah, like that's literally my instant reactions from episode 1 and 2 is just like, it felt like this. Like, that's, if I can describe how it felt, you know, being a young child watching cartoons on Saturday morning, this is what this felt like. Just back,
absolutely,
back to form. Like, perfectly, like chef's kiss, like no notes as far as like being able to just, you know, pick up a series right where it left off.
Yeah,
like,
literally
insane how well they were able to do that. Rico, what were some of your instant reactions for episode 1?
Yeah, this was a really great start for the series, especially, you know, picking things right where the original animated series left off. Just kind of like having the team recuperating from the loss of Xavier, right, and kind of figuring out particularly Cyclops, like figuring out his role as a leader in this. And I really like they kind of centered on him in this first episode. But really just the overall, the stuff I really loved in this episode. One, the animation is just awesome. Like the way it still feels like the 90s, but also it's still updated a little bit. Like there's a lot of the action sequences in general just look a lot better because you got to make them look really cool. Yeah. But the team action sequences were just amazing. The shot of them when the jet gets blown up, and of course Cyclops stops himself with the beam to land on the ground, which was epic. Come on. And then of course just like the way they give everybody their moment to display their powers and just like have a great awesome action moment. Was just incredible. And also I love the way that we're introduced to Sunspot in this episode. Because one, it reminds me of one of my main memories of watching the show was actually the original premiere of the show, which was them bringing in Jubilee. So kind of seeing them do kind of the same thing with Sunspot here, and then actually having Jubilee be the one that kind of like helps them kind of transition into that life with the X-Men is really cool. So I was like, oh man, this really does feel like watching the original series, and the character that kind of started it all, Jubilee, kind of being the one to kind of help usher him in, was just like really, really cool.
Yeah. And like the little teeny tiny details to make it still feel like the 90s, like they didn't leave off any, like they picked back up right where they left off, but like there are Walkmen in it. Like at one point one gets destroyed. Like you know what I mean? Like it's not like, oh, here's a CD player, or oh, here's an MP3, like they're
they're set in the time
90s,
which is awesome. And the original cast is back, which makes me feel like I'm in the 90s again.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It was perfect. By the way, before we get into big takeaways, so the way we're going to do this is kind of exactly how we did this for the Bad Batch multi-episode premiere. So we're going to go to our takeaways for episode 1. Then we're going to do like our instant reactions to episode 2, then takeaways for episode 2, and then we're going to do predictions for all of them to get us into next week's episode with episode 3. Just so we got that all tied up. Rico, would you like to go to some big takeaways?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Why don't you kick off episode 1 takeaways?
Okay, so one of the things I really do love about this episode is actually the title of it, which is To Me My X-Men, but actually the use of it throughout the episode. Obviously the words have been used by Professor X throughout not just the show but the comics as well, and it's used throughout the comics by other characters as well. But it's just got like a its place within X-Men lore. But the way it's used, first off, like well, again in the main team action sequence that was before, after Cyclops has his epic superhero landing. He says the words "To Me, my X-Men," which is just it's a great leader moment for him in that part of the episode, and of course, it just leads to some awesome moments afterwards. And then, of course, later on, when we have the scene with Magneto, of course, when he talks about the whole scene with the will, and then he says, "Now everything belongs to me, my X-Men." That whole phrase has been flipped on its head in such great ways, and I just thought that was a great testament to the writers and how they're able to use that phrase, an important phrase, and then use it in such different contexts. That it made the whole, they used that for the final words of the episode, of course, and it just they made the words hit a little bit harder, and I just really enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, what's funny is, yeah, I it leads in perfectly to kind of what I want, because I wanted to talk about Magneto in episode, like my takeaways for episode 1. It leads perfectly into that, and that's kind of how we ended episode 1 with Magneto saying that. But I love that Magneto just like shows up and goes, "Hey, this is mine now. You guys work for me now. I'm the boss." Like, it's just a very funny way. Like, I know, again, it wasn't funny, but it was a funny, like, kind of like interaction. It was just like, "Hey, yeah, I'm in charge now. Deal with it." Like, like
here's the will.
Yeah. He just kind of like tosses
I got
around.
receipts.
He's like, they walk in and he's basically kind of just slowly rearranging Xavier's office and stuff.
So, yeah, he's already getting comfortable.
Yeah. I just kind of enjoyed that.
It's perfectly set up too, because they're watching like the follow of them dealing with the master mold and all that, and then all of a sudden like what's gonna happen now? Who's gonna deal with this? Or like what's gonna be our thing we gotta deal with? And all of a sudden we and like, oh, here we go.
Yeah, I loved how that was just kind of like brought in immediately. Magneto's here now. But yeah, do you want to get to, I guess, quick thoughts for episode 2?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. All right. So, I mean, I've already said this. It was bringing back immediately the original series, and just kind of, the 90s nostalgia was there. It was perfectly there. And I just appreciate, so kind of what you said in episode 1, we kind of had moments for us as the audience to, not remember the characters, but like to just, for each character kind of shine for a second type of thing. And we even had that, like we had the superhero landing with Cyclops. We had, we had multiple times that was happening with all of our characters, like all of our big characters. I like that episode 2 immediately gets into like a normal like X-Men episode. Like, this is what's happening. There's going to be a lot like, and they just throw us into everything type of thing. Like it's not like an exaggerated part 1 and part 2 of like the opening episode where we just immediately start getting into conflict and stuff like that. And so I really appreciate that, because it kind of sets the pace for the rest of the season. Is going to be just like, batshit crazy. Like, things are just happening all the time now. So I'm really looking forward to kind of, the pacing of the rest of the season. And I think it was demonstrated very well in episode 2. But Rico, what were some of like your instant reactions for episode 2?
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing. Like the way the first episode was just kind of like this introductory episode, like, hey, the X-Men are back. Here's how they interact as a family, but here's how they also kick ass when they're out on the battlefield, basically. Especially, and then also doing, I guess, like an old foe from the original series. And then now for this one, they're thrown into a little bit more of a serious conflict, both internally but also like globally, because of that. Now we're bringing in like the government, Dr. Cooper, who is a character that we were interacting with earlier. And she's also voiced by the original Jean Grey, which I thought was really cool. How they brought her back, into that role, because they have a different actress doing Jean now. So now, and now we're doing with like the ramifications of Magneto back from the original series as well, and he's also trying to make amends for that in a way, because he's trying to honor his old friend at the same time. So yeah, again, we're thrown into like a lot more serious conflict, but they waste no time just like diving into some pretty serious subject matter too as well. But one of the things I did love about this episode is like the little side story is the fact that Jean is dealing with her a pregnancy and she goes into labor in this episode. It's a whole great adventure basically with her and Wolverine because Wolverine doesn't know how to handle the situation. And then of course there's the whole situation with the doctor and all that with the and Gambit asking Rogue to siphon Doctor's abilities to help deliver the baby. There's some wild stuff in that whole storyline, and it's pretty wild, but it all leads to the birth of young Nathan Summers, who will eventually become Cable, which is like it's a really it's a great little Easter egg thrown in there. We've obviously seen Cable throughout the X-Men animated series in the past. So obviously getting to see the actual birth of the character is really cool. And I assume we're going to get to see the character later on the season at some point. Like, how can you not include Cable in this season? So yeah, I just love that. Like, we're getting our first little dose of Cable, but only as a little baby.
Yeah, I loved having the Wolverine moments when he's just like kind of scrambling around. Like that. I would have loved to kind of had more of that, but because Wolverine's kind of just like the brooding guy character like all the time, but like just to have him kind of being thrown off his game just a little bit,
driving like a maniac while Jean has to move people while also focusing on her labor pains.
Yeah,
like, exactly. There's some wild stuff in there, man. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Do you want to get to some episode 2 big takeaways?
Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to kick off takeaways for episode 2 with so many questions. And my predictions are questions too. Like I'm just going to be asking questions moving forward. But what is up with Rogue and Magneto? What is up with Magneto? Does he have some sort of resistance? Because it looked like they were touching hand to hand.
Yeah,
type of thing. And
like his powers are able to cancel out hers.
Yeah, so I don't know if he had like a mini barrier that we just couldn't see. What's going on? So already 2 questions right there. Third question is, are we gonna get a Rogue, Magneto, and Gambit love triangle? Like, what is happening?
Yeah,
I have so many questions, and I know. Look, we don't have answers right now, but I just felt like I literally was asking those questions out loud when I was watching the episode. Like, what is happening? How can she touch Magneto with Magneto not having any problems? Obviously, Gambit, heard some of the interaction and like because he was around the corner. We got the shot of him around the corner when Rogue is leaving. So
dropping the card, all sad.
Yeah. So
there's Gambit
already elements of a love triangle. Like, what is happening?
Yeah, and we had that scene in the first episode in the club too, where he's like, it kind of seems like I'd be willing to like hold hands with you for real, and he's he clearly doesn't want. It's a clear, there's a lot going on. They could be a throuple.
But anyway, yeah, I know we don't have answers to it yet. I had so many questions that that was the biggest takeaway that I had. I was left with during episode 2. But I'm sure we're gonna get more insight to that, whether it's just like a thread that's woven throughout the season or what's going on. We're going to find out bits and pieces of what's going on. It's going to come to a head at some point between Rogue and Gambit. I'm sure, there's going to be more into this, but yeah, I had to ask my questions. But Rico, what were some of your big takeaways from episode 2?
Yeah, I couldn't remember if Rogue and Magneto actually had something that was directly referenced in the old animated series. I know there's stuff between them in the comics, so I don't know if they're just kind of referencing that as like old history that hasn't been brought up within the show yet. So that'll be pretty interesting to see get brought up later on as well. Excuse me. But one of the things I probably loved the most in this episode was, well, one, I love how they call back to episode 1 by bringing back the Executioner character. He kind of goes into his full villain mode here when he gets his full mask and causes chaos at the UN during Magneto's trial. So that was pretty crazy. But of course that everything leading up to that, kind of escalates to this big moment where he ends up getting the shot off, or he thinks he's getting Magneto, but of course Storm jumps in and takes the shot for him. And of course that obviously leads to what happens to her later on in the episode. But it really pisses off Magneto, and he ends up putting the man on on the UN symbol, and also taking the judges, and taking
The
them all the way up,
spice.
even pretty much to the borderlines of space, and you see them getting all nice and chilly when they're breathing that cold air out there. But boy, those are some a pretty powerful speech from Magneto at the end when he just basically been pushed to the brink because he has been trying to play it nice this whole time. And then of course he sees what they're trying to do to mutants, and he goes, yeah, like, you know, just like, this is your, he gives them the final warning basically, and and it was pretty awesome way he does it, because he basically shows executioner like, I could literally, he tells him to his face, I could squash you like a bug right now, but I'm not gonna do it. And then he tells the judges like, I'm trying to be good, and goes, just don't, and he says the words verbatim, don't make me let you down. I was like, ooh, that's pretty powerful words right there.
Yeah.
And I was like, so I'm like, I really like this arc that we're seeing from Magneto within this episode. Like, I like that he was basically the focus of it. He also has another great badass moment when he's being arrested, and he turns the helicopters on all of them because she tries to tell him like, oh, you won't get me with your guns, and goes, okay, well, I'll just turn your helicopter blades on. How about that? I'm like, oh my gosh. He's like, they're not afraid to kind of do some like to hint at like pretty gruesome stuff. They probably won't, like, obviously they won't show it, but they're not afraid to like at least hint at what these characters are willing to do with their powers. So I think that's I love the whole just like brutality of Magneto, but also the way he's able to control it as well.
Yeah. A thought occurred to me while I was watching the series, but also while you were just kind of talking about the scene where, you know, Storm jumps in and takes the hit from the I guess the ray that, you know, stops the mutant powers.
The radiation from the Sentinel beam.
Would it have been that bad if Magneto had gotten hit? He could still have been the leader of the X-Men, just not with mutant powers.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm just saying.
I'm sure they wouldn't have minded it. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying in general, that kind of would have solved a lot of things. Like, they're not going to do anything. The judges are obviously not going to, you know, lock Magneto up anymore if he doesn't have any powers. The X-Men have kind of more reason to believe Magneto doesn't have super sinister intentions anymore because he can't do shit. And so he kind of gets his way, and he can still, because of Charles's will, still owns the mansion, still is the leader of the act. Like, literally can do everything except have his powers. I don't know if that would have been a bad situation. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
almost would have been like X-Men 3 when they had the whole cure stuff.
Right.
Because then doing it to people against their will versus them having the choice to do it, I think is
right. No. I don't think it's a good. I don't think it's a good case scenario either way. Like, I don't think, you know, any of the X-Men or Magneto or anything like that should have their powers taken away from them involuntarily, type of thing. I'm just saying, in that particular situation where either Magneto or Storm's going to get hit, like, of the two, I think things would have still turned out okay had Magneto got hit. Like, in the grand scheme of everything, he still owns Xavier Mansion. He's still the leader of the X-Men. He can still, you know, lead by example without powers. Storm still has all of her powers, so she doesn't like ditch the X-Men and do any, like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just kind of like the judges aren't going to do anything to Magneto anymore because they're like, okay, well, he doesn't have any powers. Kind of not afraid of him anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that situation kind of all resolves itself in that circumstance. That's all I'm thinking about. I just wish we could have maybe had an episode that dealt with I blame the MCU on this now because with all of the multiverse stuff and everything, like, I'm just kind of thinking about different things that could have potentially happened at different jumping off points. So that would have just been
branching out on everything.
Yeah. That would just been interesting. But that, you know, it's just a thought that occurred to me. But Rico, you want to get to some predictions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. All right, why don't you kick off predictions?
Okay, so this episode ends with, you know, everyone's kind of hanging out at the expansion, and, you know, Jean's doing fine, the baby's doing fine. There's a knock on the door, and of course they're all really sad after Storm left, and Morph is like, you know, she's gonna come back, you know, of course, well, any time now. Boom, knock on the door. He goes, look, that's her now, and they open the door, and it's another Jean who is distraught, and it really seems like she needs help. and you're looking there, you're like, wait, what's going on? Why are there two genes going in one place right now? and and then we just cut the credits because it's just like, hey, we cut to our gene, like, hey, why is there two of them? So I really can't wait to see how this unfolds, because I don't know if this is, it could be a number of things. It could be Mystique, like trying to be Jean, not even knowing that Jean's already there. That'd be pretty dumb of her. But it could be like a time travel situation, of some form of Jean. We talked about earlier the birth of Cable, and how originally like his mother is a clone of Jean, named Madeline Pryor. So there's a good chance we don't know which one is the actual Jean, which one could be Madeline Pryor. That could be something that could be addressed in the next episode. But yeah, that was a pretty wild ending to just kind of just be like, okay, now credits.
Yeah, as cliffhangers go, that was pretty intense.
Yeah, and we know X-Men love to get weird with their storyline. Like there's literally no like limit to like where their storylines go. You get the Savage Land, you get space, you get other time zones, other dimensions. Like it's just crazy. But yeah, I'm really excited to see how that plays out next. Really this week, but next week. But also one thing is like we at the beginning of the first episode, we get like a falling newspaper, which kind of gives like a little headline, and what I think it references Spider-Man in the headline. So of course we obviously know, because of the fact that Spider-Man and the X-Men shows crossed over in the past, that like these characters all exist within one universe, and there's also a lot of other heroes within that other this universe. We've seen like characters like a version of Kang within the X-Men show, a version of Captain America. We've seen the Punisher, Daredevil, a bunch of different heroes, Fantastic Four. So it makes me wonder, like, now that we're in this kind of new era for the show, and it's being done by the MCU, like Marvel Studios itself. I'm very curious to see like what cameos they kind of have in store for us in this series, and what they could surprise us with. There's definitely some characters they can throw in there that we haven't seen in either show yet. That could be who knows if they could be like MCU versions of those characters, or if they're just actually more comic book versions of those same characters. Like if bringing back Wanda and Pietro, coming back, because they're originally in the show before, but just bringing back them. Yeah, just another cool here. Miss Marvel would be a cool like way, even though she's not from the 90s, but you could still bring characters like that. Even characters that were in the X-Men after the show, ended, and then they debuted in X-Men comics afterwards. Like you can just bring back versions of them. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about Cable potentially, coming in, and I mean we do have one big MCU release this year.
Mm-hmm.
Deadpool might be.
Yeah, I don't think Deadpool ever really. He showed up as being like shapeshifted into. I don't think he ever showed up in the show. So that'd be.
I don't know if he was as popular yet while the original series.
No, he was still growing. Like it was still the 90s, and that was like his time. So, I'm very curious. Like, yeah, they gotta throw him in there for like a little episode arc, I think. And it could be our Deadpool.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like,
would they save that for the movie too? That would probably be my.
But that's the thing. Like, what if he pops in here, and then in the movie they reference his pop in type of thing? He's like, I was animated once, and you were there. Like, and he says it to like Wolverine, like offhand, or to anyone.
That's something
like
I can see happening.
You know what I mean? Like, it could be like that. It would be funny. It would be a funny plant to have here, and then him reference it in his movie.
I love it. Yeah, I would love that.
Show everything was connected, but yeah, I'm very interested to see the next episode after that cliffhanger with Jean at the door with Jean and her baby in the bed right there.
Which one is Jean?
Yeah. Another question I had, which we've kind of gone back and forth and kind of glossed over this thing, but Storm without her powers, like Storm is too big of a character. Like she's not just like, okay, Storm's gone after episode 2, she's never coming back. We're definitely getting a storyline with Storm. Like there's no way we're not getting Storm back and stuff like that. So I'm really interested in what her storyline is going to be, whether we're going to get like small progression throughout other episodes, or if we're going to get like an entire episode dedicated to kind of her journey. I think there's got to be like some like mystical journey that she's going to go on, and she's going to figure out how to like unlock her powers. It's gonna be like, the powers were always with inside, like inside you all along type of thing.
Mhm.
You just had to like be able to unlock them again. Like I think it's going to be something like that because like the answer that Beast gave her was like it's like the collars, but it's just like indefinite type of thing. Like we don't know. He wasn't saying like he said permanent, but it was like it's like the collars though. So it's kind of like when you take the collars off, you know, it wears off immediately. So like hopefully like she finds out how to like, you know, change, like unlock it within herself again type of thing. Because I like Storm too much. I don't want Storm to be benched. There's no way we're getting Storm without powers for the rest of the season, and that's it type of thing. So
yeah. Well, we were talking about this earlier. That we were again also going back to, you know, bringing in other characters from Marvel. That would be a great excuse if she was going back to, or you know, going to Wakanda.
Ooh.
That would be a great reason for her to go there, and especially if she's going on some kind of mystical, spiritual journey to kind of bring her powers back out of her. There's also the character Forge within the X-Men universe that is someone who kind of operates within, not within the expansion, but he has like his own spot that he hangs out with. So she could just be going hanging out with other X-Men that just aren't at the mansion, just because maybe it's just too painful for her to be there, and also she doesn't have any like she doesn't feel like she'd be useful now. She doesn't have her powers, like in the same way. But I also wanted to bring up something because you also, now we're talking about Storm. Aside from Cyclops and his Cyclops beam landing, probably my favorite shot from the whole 2 episodes is Storm using the turning the sand into glass and turning it into a glass tornado to take out the Sentinels. Probably one of the coolest uses of her powers I've ever seen. I just love the way that she just has a presence the entire 2 episodes. Like the way she just he commands respect from those the UN representatives, and she's like, "Why are we listening to you guys? Just like shut up, listen to me, and you will actually live." Like, oh man,
like I said,
I loved her.
She's too good of a character for her to just be like, okay, she's done. Like we're definitely getting a storyline with her, and I can't. I'm here for it. I can't wait, and I hope it's one of those where it progresses and we see her able to re-unlock her mutant abilities and stuff like that, because she can feel when she's not connected. You know what I mean? Like she immediately could feel that. So I'm hoping like maybe like we'll see it, or she like all of a sudden she like is like, I feel something familiar, like, you know what I mean? Like something like that I think would be cool. Like and so it gives her hope, and then she like is able to like work on something.
And again, I'm so glad they brought the original voice actors back, because I was thinking, like, first of all, that scene where when she loses her powers and she talks about she couldn't feel the moisture and the breeze, and she's like, oh my gosh, it's so powerful the way she delivers it. And of course the reading of the letter later on when she leaves is even more like heartbreaking. And it's the connection that the voice actress has with Storm, the character, because she's played her for so long. But also I think about like a good voice performance for me is like if I close my eyes and I feel like I'm listening to like an audio play, and you still like convey like the character. Like that's what I feel like these characters are. Like if I was just like listening like this, like I feel like I'm listening to like a radio version of this, I can still feel like I'm watching like the characters doing what they're doing. And so like, man, just it's incredible work all around.
Yeah, absolutely. But as we always say, that's what we think. Let us know in the comments below. What did you think of episode 1 and 2 of the X-Men 97 series? And what are you most looking forward to seeing this season? I mean, there are no wrong answers. You could hope that you see a cameo from a character that, wasn't always in the original X-Men. Maybe was in a crossover from the Spider-Man universe during that time. Anything, no wrong answers. And how do you think Storm will be back in the series? Like, are we going to have, a storyline of her unlocking her powers and coming back during one of the big battle moments? How are we going to have this happen? There are no wrong answers there either. Put them down in the comments. And as always, don't forget, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to hear about all of our latest audio and video podcast releases. Bye, everybody!
Popping Off presents That Recap Show.